Today's GovLove episode is brought to you by Citizen Lab, an online community engagement platform for local governments. Forget about juggling multiple tools. With Citizen Lab, you can streamline your community engagement projects. It's easy to use and backed by Citizen Lab's team of experts who are dedicated to supporting you and your team. Their all-in-one platform makes engagement easier. You can learn more by going to citizenlab.co. That's citizenlab.co. Hey y'all, coming to you from Jacksonville, Florida, this is GovLove, a podcast about local government, brought to you by engaging local government leaders. I'm Ben Kittelson, Senior Consultant at Telus and GovLove co-host. We have a great episode for you today. We are talking about one of the best local government workplaces. But first, the best way to support GovLove is to become an Engaging Local Government Leaders member. ELGL is a professional association engaging the brightest minds in local government. And mark your calendars, ELGL's annual conference is coming this fall, October 13th and 14th in Phoenix, Arizona. You can learn more about the conference and register by going to elgl.org/ELGL22. Now, let me introduce today's guest. Dan Biles is the County Administrator of Pasco County, Florida, a position he's been in since 2017. Previously, he served as Deputy County Manager of Infrastructure at Jefferson County, Alabama, and he's also worked for the city of Corpus Christi, Texas. And longtime listeners of the podcast will recognize Dan from his two appearances on GovLove back in 2017. We talked to him when he was still working for Jefferson County, and then shortly after he started at Pasco about the response to Hurricane Irma. So we'll be sure to link to those. And with that, thank you, Dan, for coming on GovLove. Thanks for joining us and talking with me today.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for the invitation. I always enjoy telling our story of what we've done at Pasco because everybody else can do the same thing. There's no magic to it.
Awesome. No, yeah, I'm very excited to dig into kind of what you guys have been doing. One of our traditions on GovLove, though, is to start with the lightning round. So we got some fun questions here to get you going. So first, what was the first concert that you went to?
Oh, man. So, it's kind of rough thinking back into the 70s and 80s because that's when it was. So I probably can't pinpoint it, but let's just say the one I remember is Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo, George Strait. But that would have been early 80s. So, Amarillo by Morning, that kind of stuff, not as later stuff. So.
Oh, that's a good first concert. That's
It is. Yeah. I've seen him a few times since then, and it's a different concert than what a lot of the acts are today, but it's good.
Yeah, my first one was Kenny Chesney, so not quite the same brand of country. Yeah.
No. I think it's a little more active than what you see with George.
Yeah.
So.
Awesome. Well, my next lightning round question for you. What was your first job?
So my first paid by a corporation job was working a greasy kitchen at I think it was a Grandy's restaurant. I don't even think they exist anymore. It's a little different than a McDonald's. I'm trying to think. Probably a little closer to Chick-fil-A. I'm trying to think. Yeah. But the one where I had to fill out a W-9, get W-2 and all that.
Yeah. Actually pay taxes. Yeah.
Right.
No, working in fast food, that is, you learn a lot about the workplace and yourself doing those.
Oh, so. You do. Yeah.
All right. My next letter question. What was the last movie you saw either in theaters or streamed?
So, not a big movie goer. Probably the last, but we do probably the last one we did is we got out the extended version Lord of the Rings on a weekend where don't have a lot going on, and we started early Saturday morning and you finish it sometime on Sunday.
Yeah.
So that's probably it. That's an all-time classic just from a cinematology perspective and the scenes and some of the stuff going on I'm a fan of the book in Tolkien. Mm-hmm. It's not you can't take books to screen, but that very well. But they did a pretty good job with that one. A lot better than The Hobbit. I don't think he did The Hobbit as well.
No,
it's either that one and my last Ask Me Anything. I got asked about what was my favorite Star Wars movie, and I had to you got to set the first three because none of the rest touched the first three. Because I actually saw
Yeah.
those in theaters when they came out, in '77 and '80 and '83, where you actually had to wait,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then Rogue One because it's a classic Shakespearean tragedy,
Yeah.
right?
Rogue One is
So
really good. Yeah.
it is one of my favorites outside the top three
Yeah.
or the first three.
Well, I went back and watched Revenge of the Sith like very recently, and I would. It's not as bad as I remembered.
Right.
So there are some
They're
like
not. I
good
mean,
things. Yeah.
I'm not a Star Wars purist,
Yeah.
you know, but yeah, it's just something different when, you have to wait in a line and that's the
Yeah.
only place you can watch the movie, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there aren't the options you have today. So,
Yeah. Where you can. Yeah. It's all at your fingertips. Yeah.
right.
All right. And then my last night question: Where do you go for inspiration?
So it's more of what, it's not necessarily where I go, it's kind of what I do.
Mm-hmm.
Adam Grant in his book Originals has a talks about active procrastination, and that's
Hmm.
not what he calls it. It's but using the time, and it's not just procrastination. It's basically understanding the problem set, the conditions around the problem, and then just letting it stew or simmer or marinate, and frankly, let your subconscious work on it.
Yeah.
I'm always surprised when I do something like that, and then all of a sudden I'm like driving to work and decide this, hey, we ought to do it this way, and then pops into your head, and so your subconscious has been working on it, which is a very powerful part of your brain. Um, while your active conscious is doing other things, and it's amazing how many times you get really great ideas that way. And Adam Grant has all the stats and a ton of data behind that. But I don't know, probably the best label is proactive procrastination, if you will. And just kind of letting it stew or marinate. And we, and frankly, my whole team kind of works through that now, where let's take an idea, we'll talk about it, and then we'll just kind of go away and let it rest for a
Yeah.
week or two, and then kind of see how it comes together after that. So not necessarily aware, but how, right?
Yeah.
How.
Yeah.
So
No, that is you're naming something that I realize I do all the time, where I like think through
hmm
something, not quite sure
hmm
about it, and I just like
hmm
let it marinate. Yeah.
right.
And
Yeah,
then the answer comes
it
to you.
was I never could put a name to it until I read Adam Grant's book. Um,
Yeah.
but when I was an engineer, so when I was doing real engineering, you come across a problem and like, man, how do I solve this? And you kind of set it to the side, and you go on and work on another part of the project. And then as you're working, all of a sudden this idea, the way to solve it, kind of just shows up, and you go back and, oh
Yeah.
yeah, this is the way to do it. So um, it's very powerful because the
Yeah.
subconscious is an extremely powerful part of our brain that we just really don't tap as much as we should.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, um, so one of the other things I'd like to ask, and I'm sure we may have had this conversation back in some of those earlier interviews, but just for maybe our listeners that
Yeah,
weren't subscribed back then, what was your path to
right.
local government? What was your kind of path to kind of where you are now?
Yeah, well, circuitous. I always say it was not normal, and then I hear other people's paths. I'm like, well, no, maybe mine is more normal than
Yeah. Yeah.
than I give it credit for. Right? I spent after school, you went to school to be an engineer, civil engineer. Spent 6.5, 7 years in the military. Then a little more than a decade doing hard engineering as a consulting engineer for design firm, both for public and private clients. And then one day when we were in Corpus Christi, and working mainly, our biggest public client was the city. City manager called me and said, "Hey, I need you to help run my engineering department." Up until that point, while we had worked with local governments, worked with state governments on various projects, I never ever thought about sitting on the other side of the table.
Mm,
But did took him up on the offer and realized how powerful an impact local government actually makes when it does its job well. right? And so,
Hmm.
from improving community centers and, rebuilding roads, improving water treatment plants, and all the different things local government does, because we touch the people more than any other form of government, and are there with the people. Really struck home in on connected really again to my purpose, right?
Hmm.
And so you do a project, the parks project, then you go out and see and watch the people enjoy that. Really really is powerful and motivator. And so yeah, started there, and then you kind of went through the path, where we went from there. So
Yeah. No, I think one of the reasons I asked that question is that like you're right, there is no one path, and so
right,
everybody says like, oh, I don't think I have a normal path, but as I think,
yeah,
and yeah, maybe it's like because when you get an MPA, like there's
right,
professors talk about a certain path, and I think some city
hmm,
managers talk about a certain path, but
right.
there's not one. I don't think.
There's not, and it's kind of, as we're talking, going around my executive team's room in my head. So you got me, you got, you know, I got Mike, who spent very similar to me, active duty Air Force, longtime consultant. Then county hired him to run the utility consult engineering piece.
Hmm.
Eric, 20-year Navy guy, came to work for this county. Sally started 42 years ago as a typist
Wow.
in, I want to say Seminole County, but I may get that wrong, and she'll get mad at me now because I forget, and started there. So she spent 40 plus years in local government at city,
Wow.
at two different counties in a city, from the very bottom. And brilliant lady, great perspective to the group. Kathy spent time in healthcare before coming to local government. My fire chief, firefighter all his life. And then, Mark, who does our office performance management, a lot of business background,
Mm.
MBA, PhD in business management and leadership. And then I have Joanna, who's chief of staff, who's an MPA student, USF,
Hmm.
right? And then kind of in various seats in local government that way. So, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, there's probably this, here's the perfect path, but
Yeah.
then there's the 98% of the people that have their own path,
But
right?
don't do
The
that.
people
Yeah.
go in and out, right? So,
Well, cool. Well, part of why we
yeah.
wanted to have you on was to talk about some of the workplace things that you've done to kind of engage employees and create like
Hmm.
a great workplace. And Pasco County was earned one of the best places to work in local government from ELGL in 2021. And so I guess
Right.
maybe as a way into our conversation, how do you think about or measure or understand what like a great workplace is?
I'll start off with, I have very few original great ideas. Most of my ideas I steal from other people. And
Yeah.
so the definition I have is stolen from, um, now I can't think of the name. Everybody Matters is the name of the book. I can't think of the name of the author. Gary, it'll come to me at some point in the conversation. Anyway, um, it's great organizations are ones that create a place in which people willingly invest themselves fully in the work of the organization, right? And so
Hmm.
all that stuff is linked together. People, the work of the organization, they create a place. So leadership focus on the people, serving the people, so that they can invest themselves in the work of the organization. I think that captures really what we're thinking of when we talk about a great place to work, right? And
Hmm.
you know, I'll always tell people, we're basically about 3,000 employees. Um, Probably going to be 3,600 with a new budget because we're taking the jail back from the sheriff, the detention center, and so some other stuff going on, and we're growing like weeds here in Pasco
Hmm.
County. And so I tell people, think about when you worked for a small business or a small family business, right? They understood culture.
Hmm.
They didn't maybe go to school and have an MBA on leadership and organizational culture or whatever, but they understood what makes a place tick and that you had to take care of people, right? And that
Hmm.
you love the people, right? And so Small business gets that because, frankly, a small business doesn't get that. They don't exist very long.
Hmm.
And so we just have to take that, what they know and what we intuitively know is a great place, and how we treat people, um, which frankly is how our parents taught us to treat people, right?
Hmm.
Be kind, be generous, be compassionate, be considerate, those things, right? The
Hmm.
golden rule.
Hmm.
And do that, and we'll have a great workplace, and people will willingly invest themselves in the work that we're doing. And that's really when you get remarkable results.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's and again, I stole that definition, but I'm not. I sorry, most of my great ideas come from somebody else
Yeah.
because so
I think
there's a
that's
lot of smart
just
people out
being,
there,
yeah, that's just being smart and like finding the best resource, right?
right?
um, so I'm curious, like knowing that as like maybe a philosophy or like a way
Hmm.
to approach
Right.
workplace. How do you, when you came in to Pasco, and maybe it's not something you did right away, but over your time there, how did you like identify like here's where I think we're at, and this is where I want to go, and like these are the things that will get us there, or yeah, how do you go
Right.
about like
So
figuring out what a new
r-
workplace that you're
r-
new to, how it is, and what needs to change?
right, you know, so you gotta listen, right, and take
Hmm.
time. And so I'll Pasco, when they went through the recruitment process to hire me, uh, did it a little different. They actually, Michelle, my predecessor, gave them about a year's notice, and so they took a full year to walk through slowly the process, which then gave the candidates, while you're like, okay, let's hurry this up, um, time to actually do really good due diligence and research, and then brought us in for a 2.5 to 3 day tour. I spent 8 hours sitting next to two of the senior leaders in the county, just listening to them
Hmm.
and asking questions when I had one. Um, but listen, and you'll pick up because the organizational culture is the way the organization does business, right?
Yeah.
It's the unwritten rules of how we work with each other,
Hmm.
right? There's they're not written down. They're just how do we treat each other? How do we work together? That's the organizational culture, and so you can pick up clues relatively quickly just by listening to people and watching interactions, and being a people watcher. And so what I saw was that Pasco County, and I'll start back. Michelle's predecessor was John Gallagher, who had been the county administrator for about 30 years before he retired.
Hmm.
And he was hired because at that time, the county had commissioners being arrested for corruption. And this is back in the
Hmm.
80s now,
Hmm.
senior leadership. And so he was brought in to clean it up. He built a very, what I'll call hierarchical, authoritarian way. So all the decisions were made by him in his office with his budget director, um, in partnership. And so, enterprises didn't know, revenue, and they just knew what they had to spend, right? They didn't have
Yeah.
any idea what was really going on. All this was made there. And so Michelle, while started to put some processes in place and really did a good job of putting processes and pieces and people in place, didn't understand how to make the jump from that to truly empowering people so that the people can do the work of the organization. And so it's still a very hierarchical. She was involved in a lot of decision making. A lot of things had to come into that office to get uh, you know made decisions made. So very micromanaging. Didn't trust people. And so when I started, they gave us a 2 week overlap. Um, and then day one, after 2 weeks, I brought all the senior leaders, all the directors into a room and said, okay, I'm going to give you an introduction to myself. And just went through some very basics, who I am, right? What are my
Hmm.
core values? What kind of is my purpose? What do I believe about organizational leadership? How am I going to lead the organization? And what I expect of them as leaders. Um, it really talked about leadership philosophy, about, you know, 3 words: people, purpose, performance. And again, I stole that from somebody. I just can't remember who now. But it's been years. So, and I didn't write it. Was back before I wrote that stuff down.
Yeah.
But take care of your people, empower your people, give them the tools, training, resources necessary to do their job. connect them to their purpose. And very few organizations have the purpose that a local government has, right? We serve
Mm-hmm.
our community, create a better future. That's actually our mission statement. 8 words. But that mission statement applies to basically every local government, right? We serve our
Yeah.
community, create a better future. That's what we want to do. Now, they may have different mission statements, but that's what we want to do. And so the people that come to work for us, that's what they want to do. They want to serve the community, create a better future. And you do those 2 things, then you get great performance, right? And so I said, flat out, I'm going to trust you, because as a leader, they're not going to trust you until you show that you're going to trust them. You have to give trust away before you can ever get trust. And they were operating in a low trust environment. And so I immediately, with help of my team, started figuring out, okay, what decisions are being made at my level that don't need to be made at my level? What's the right level? Do we need to make them? How do we push this stuff down? I mean, I was approving voicemail for new employees. Who got voicemail? Why, on a $1.7 billion company that's coming to the CEO, which is effectively the job, right?
Yeah.
But that's what it was. In there, I would walk into meetings and look around in the room, say, okay, what are we doing? Get there. Who's the expert? Okay, why am I in here? You do the work, and when you think you need to come to me because it's a board issue or whatever, then come to me.
Yeah.
But you're the experts. I'm going to trust your recommendations. Y'all go figure it out and bring me a recommendation. You don't need me in part of the discussion. I have, somebody would come into my room, hey, I need you to solve this problem. And I look at them and say, nope, that's your problem. You want some advice, some guidance, some mentoring? I'll do that. But ultimately, that's your call.
Yeah.
They were doing 3 rounds and 3 levels of interviews to hire mid-level managers and, say, department directors, with the county administrator in on the last one, which I think we've all seen in this work environment. You can't do that, right?
Yeah.
You got to get to a decision quickly. And I told my senior team, so 8, right? 4 assistant county administrators, my fire chief now, my OPM director, and my chief of staff, and said, the only interviews I'm going to sit in is when I'm replacing one of you. I will not sit in an interview for your director. If you want advice, guidance, I'll do that. But here's the deal. If I sit in your interview, who's hiring the director? Me or you? Who do they work for? Me or you?
Yeah.
They work for you. So if I sit in there, I'm going to tell you who to hire, even if I don't intentionally tell you who to hire. You're going to gravitate to my position, and I then can't hold you accountable for the hire.
Yeah.
You want advice, guidance, thoughts, and they've all done that. I said, but ultimately, I need you to make those decisions, because that's your job. We talk about, in phrase I use, and again, I stole it from somebody, don't know who, is only do what only you can do.
Yeah.
If there's something that you're doing that somebody else in the organization is doing, why are you doing it? So what that did is that took me from a calendar when I took over Michelle's job that was packed from 7:30 to 6 at night with meetings and other events, to include she scheduled lunch, because she couldn't get lunch if she didn't schedule it.
Yeah.
To one now, my goal on a weekly average is a 50% white space, because then it gives me time to think, time to process data, and so that's what we've tried to do, and it's really about getting the decisions to the right level in the organization. I mean, who knows best to solve the frontline issues than the people in the front line?
Yeah.
Right. And so, and the other thing I tell them, and when I ask, they know the answer now, is like how many departments I'm actually qualified to run if HR screened my resume as to run the department.
Yeah.
And so we have 27 departments in the county. In the number right now, it's 6. My resume would get through the screening process on 6. So why would I tell my community development director how to run community development?
Yeah.
Right. Or fire, another great example, or coming out soon, the jail. I don't know how to run a jail. I have no clue how to run a jail. I got to hire somebody smart and then let them run it. Right. And so but in order to do that, you got trust, right? In order to trust, you have to have courage to trust people, because ultimately
Mm-hmm.
there's only one person responsible for every mistake that happens in Pasco County, me,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, that's anyway.
Yeah.
That's probably a long answer to a very short question.
No, I think that makes a ton of sense. And I think what you're pushing on there is like how from that top seat you can have an impact on the whole culture. But
Right.
obviously like empowering the people that report directly to you is like a huge piece of this. But
Mm-hmm.
how do you get that to filter down the rest of the organization? Like how do you then say, hey, I'm empowering you guys, but you also need to turn around and do the same
Right.
down the ladder?
Yeah. About, I don't know, maybe a month in, 2 months in, we started having what we call team leader meetings. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
basically 2 weeks before we do two things. We have a business piece of it where we go over the next upcoming agenda for the board agenda. We talk about, policies that may be changing or things that are coming up like budget process and, tactical stuff, right? That directors need to know. And then we pause and we have a leadership discussion or training. And I think we've gone through 50 different TED Talks. All the guys that, would cost me 5 and 6 figures to come in to speak,
Mm-hmm.
they have a TED Talk out there and
Yeah.
it's free. And so we show them and talk about them, right? I could never afford Simon Sinek to show up or Adam
Yeah.
Grant or any other, right? And so I one day we did that, and I drew up on the board. Part of the discussion was a circle of influence, and I draw up on the board. And I drew, and I wrote 30 positions or 30 names on the board, and drew a circle around it. I said, okay, we have 3,000 employees, and at that time probably 2,800. I said,
Mm-hmm.
here's how many people I directly influence. If we're going to change the culture of the organization, this has to domino out,
Yeah.
right? So what I'm doing with you and the trust I'm giving you, if you don't reciprocate and take that further down the chain, this is where it stops. And so ultimately, the success of that is highly dependent on people outside that circle of 30. And 30 is probably being a little generous, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you have influence on people you interact with daily. You don't really have influence on somebody you see once a month.
Yeah.
And so, we have 700 firefighters, almost 27 active 24-hour fire stations. And so it's you don't see everybody very often, and so that we start talking about that right away. And I will say um, as part of the culture change, there were people that couldn't adjust to that and couldn't adapt with it, and we helped them find other places to work. Sometimes it took longer than it should have, but I mean, anytime you're trying to do something, I always, try to work on, give people grace, time to adjust to the new guy or new gal. But ultimately, you're a senior lead in the organization. You got to get on board,
Yeah.
right? If you're not going to get on board, then I'll help you get on board somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And we had some of that, but I will say that of the directors that exist today, 5 years in, over half of them were directors when I got here.
Hmm.
Um, my senior team of 7, 3 of them um, were in their position when I started. 2 of them I promoted as internal candidates, and then 2 are external
Hmm.
promotions into the position or hires into the position. So the organization was here really adapted well from
Yeah.
and granted, some of those were going to turn over anyway, right? I mean, they were
Mm-hmm.
30, they were a year from retirement or whatever anyway. So, I mean, you were going to get some of that anyway. So, but yeah, I mean, generally but you're right. I mean, I said at a discussion at FCCMA, and I was on one end of the table with 3,000 employees, sits next to Broward County, who's got 2 or 3 times more employees than I do.
Yeah.
But the other end of the table is a guy, he had 100 employees, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so he knows everybody's name, he knows everybody's spouse's name,
Yeah.
or partner's name or whatever. It's just it's a different mindset based on where you are, right?
Yeah.
And if you're in a small town, you got small town issues and small town things you have to deal with, and small town culture you have to deal with. That's
Mm-hmm.
different than being at say Pasco, where you got 3,000 employees and 600,000 people live in the county. It's one is not necessarily easier than the other,
Mm.
right? Some of us are better geared to one over the other, but they all have their own unique challenges and things you have to do to make it a great place to work.
Yeah. Yeah. And they require maybe different leadership approaches or styles depending on that size. And
I
well,
think you do. I think I recognize, and I had a mentor early on that probably recognized before I did that I probably
mhm.
wasn't real suited to a small
Yeah.
group because, um, one, I'm an introvert. Um, I don't necessarily get to know people super deep because that's just who I am, right? And so being at a small where you only have 100 employees is completely different than being in a place where you have 3,000. The expectations
Yeah.
are different, right? So,
Yeah.
I think we have to recognize that too in
Yeah.
ourselves and in those we work with and mentor and help them with that as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really good point. So I do want to talk about some of the kind of specific
Okay.
things that y'all
Yep.
do, and
Hmm.
you referenced one of them in I think an earlier answer, but okay, employee engagement is obviously a big part of this. So
Right.
keeping folks kind of aligned with the mission and bought in. So what are some of those approaches? And I know you mentioned one of them was you do an ask me anything session
Yes.
with folks. So
Yes.
what are some of those things,
Yeah.
and how do what's a part of them?
So we do a few different things, and I will tell you the pandemic has changed what we do and how we do it.
Yeah.
Um, we, 2 weeks into that, we're like, okay, how do we communicate with our people now that we can't have quarterly supervisors meetings and all these different things that we would do to communicate and touch and talk to our people. And so one of the things that spun out of that was Ask Me Anything. We were already using WebEx to do meetings, Cisco's platform, and I was like, okay, well, I know tech companies do those all the time. Let's figure out how to do them and do it live, right? As not a
Mhm.
written or on Twitter or Reddit or whatever, but do it video live where they can ask live questions. And so we set that up. I did the first one, and so anybody on the staff can submit an anonymous question prior to the meeting. Um, we have a box for that. Um, they can submit questions during the meeting. It's all virtual, all WebEx virtual. I'm video. I'm the only one on the video. Although last time we changed it up, it actually worked even better, where I kind of had an interviewer kind of
Mm.
cleaning the questions up for me,
Moderating.
so I can focus on the answers as opposed to the questions and the answers.
Hmm.
And so um, it it works really really well. We record it, so those that can't watch because of work, they're on a crew and they're out in the field or whatever, can come back and watch it. And they generally last anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour and a half.
Hmm.
They go through anywhere from a very tactical HR type question or facilities type question, um, to very philosophical questions. I got
Yeah.
one, Dan, what's your spirit animal? Like, holy cow, give me 30 days because it
Yeah.
doesn't come off the top of my head. And on that one, I had to take my Myers-Briggs profile, and then I Googled that with spirit animal and came up with what it was. But uh, and I had the answer the next time. But it's a horned owl, a pointed, whatever that is,
Nice.
whatever.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, I mean, and so the questions range on the gamut. I've gotten, it's open to anybody in the county. So yes, I've gotten my commissioners have joined, and I got from one, although at the time I found out later he asked was who's your favorite commissioner? Not going to answer that one.
Not gonna
Then
answer.
I got the if you were stranded on an island with a commissioner, who would it be? Sorry, not going to answer that one, right? But I will tell you that the questions are very good. They generally talk about it's about culture and leadership and what are we doing and where are we going, from a
Hmm.
county perspective. We've had questions that have led us to change policies,
Hmm.
and so the stuff that's tactical, like can we put a sidewalk along State Avenue, which is one of the streets kind of in our campus, if you will, on the west side of the county. That one went to facilities. Facilities researched it, came back with the answer, and then that all the answers like that get posted back to the AMA page
Hmm.
either before or after the meeting. And so if it's technical like that or a specific question that is really something that should be handled by the subject matter expert. We'll get that to them. They'll give us the answer, and then we'll post it back to the website so people still get the answer. Because I'm not going to know some of those details, right?
Yeah.
So that's how we do it. I will tell you, is the introvert, I am wiped out. It literally wipes me out, and my team now knows. Okay, don't schedule a meeting, within the next hour or two after that, right? Because Dan needs a little time to recover. Because it's pretty intense. The last time we did it with a moderator, and it came off even. I thought it was better because it allowed me to focus more on my answers and what I was trying to say. But ultimately, it was a tool. It's a tool for us to communicate with the team in a way that we didn't have because we weren't doing quarterly supervisor meetings. We would anymore because of the pandemic. So that's one of the tools. But that's not the only tool. We started at Pasco Town Hall as part of that to try to deal with how do we communicate. Because, one thing I think we've all found, regardless of how big or small your organization is, the one thing you can never do enough of or well enough is communicate.
Yeah.
And so we did this Pasco Town Hall where each branch gets up and talks about what they did over the last quarter, right? What everybody's doing in all the different departments. Again, about an hour and a half, which is a little longer than we want, but it's recorded. And then I talk big picture stuff, whether it's going into budget season from a revenue economy perspective, the micro economy, if you will, of the Tampa Bay region, or where we are with COVID, right? How are things going? What are we doing? How are we handling CARES money or ARP or any of those things? I would talk big picture generally at the end, and then we take any questions from anybody, and we generally get some people. So those are two things. We do a podcast, but that's one we actually started pre-pandemic, and then had to pause and figure out how to do it during the pandemic because we did it in a studio because the original vision was to be like we're in the coffee shop just having a discussion about leadership.
Yeah.
And so I think we're up to 22, 23 of them. It's me interviewing 2 leaders in the county. And I have basically the list of same 7 questions I've asked every time. And it's, who are the biggest impacts on your leadership development over the course of your career? What is your leadership philosophy? How do you lead your people? How do you train new leaders? How do you continue to improve your leadership skills? And it's amazing. Every single one of those is different.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Even though the questions are the same.
Yeah.
But the discussion with my animal services team is completely different than the discussion with my public works, stormwater team.
Yeah.
But they're both great. They bring great perspectives. And frankly, I learn something every time I do one of those. And I'm not a good interviewer, and we do those actually on all the same platforms y'all use for podcasts, but we actually video it as well and drop that in our YouTube channel. So, excuse me. So yeah, that's some of the things we do. Again, communicate. You can never do enough of that. And the larger you are, the harder it is, and the worse job you do, regardless of how good a job you think you do. We still find people that every newcomer's briefing me or one of my senior assistant county administrators. We go brief mission, vision, values, leadership philosophy, people, purpose, performance, and the org chart, high level org chart discussion with the new employees. We've been doing that for 5 years, and we still find people that didn't realize what our mission was or what our values are. So we're still working on that. I mean, it's not the CEOs of great companies realize that's their full-time job.
Yeah,
is culture.
Yeah,
it's not the operation. That's why you have a COO, or a VP of this or a VP of that. Your job is the culture of the organization.
Well, and it's not a one-time thing, right? Like you're saying,
no.
You got to talk about it constantly. Yeah.
Hmm. Well, and I was um, in the military as a commander, and that is a job you never turn off.
Yeah.
It is a 24/7, 365 job, and being, a CEO, county administrator, city manager, it's a 24/7, 365 job. You never can turn. If I go into Publix um, and have an argument with the retail clerk in front of me over something stupid, one of my employees is going to see that,
Yeah.
and they're going to say, "Why is Dan treating that person that way?"
Hmm.
And so, or at a restaurant or whatever. And so you are always, as a leader, you're always on because somebody's always watching you.
Yeah. And I'm curious, like you mentioned you had to change how you did communication and met
Hmm.
with people during the COVID like era.
Right.
How many of those like new ways of communicating, new ways of, you know, connecting with folks do you think will stick around, and are like, hey, this is going to be successful whether we can meet in person or not, versus
I,
like it was fine for that time, but probably not something that's worth keeping.
I think so. We continue to survey our team um, on whether it's Survey Monkey or whatever, on what we're doing good, what we're doing well, and where we need to improve on those types of things. I think the AMA will continue regardless. You I have assistant county administrators that do the same thing.
Hmm.
They do it with their group, a smaller version, right? Or they'll go out and sit with groups of people and say, okay, there's a chance to ask me anything you want. And different ways to do it. And so we're constantly trying to get feedback on how we're communicating internally and constantly evolving it. And we've got really good. We were going to kill a Pasco town hall when we could meet together again quarterlies or do group meetings again. And the feedback was no, we never got that information before
Hmm.
because when we were in quarterlies, we were done by branch. They'd only hear what was going on in the branch.
Yeah.
So public infrastructure, which is utilities, public works, all the normal public works type stuff, didn't know what was going on in parks. Now with the
Mm.
town hall, they know what's going on in parks. And part of that is telling them events that are coming up. There's a various different things that will continue. There are things that we've killed, um, where we started trying to do different business interviews on what's going on, and that one of our guys over our communications group would sit down with a leader and talk about what's going on in their business, and that nobody really paid any attention to that.
Hmm.
So there are things we've tried and haven't worked, um, and there are things we've hit on that people love. Right?
Yeah.
I know my chief does a weekly video for the that goes out to everybody in the fire department. And again, he's got 640, 650 firefighters, close to 700 now, and they're all working 3 different shifts
Yeah.
and over 28, 27 different fire stations. So it's a constantly evolving, and I think that's any organization. That's what it's going to be. You don't hit on something, you keep just that work, we keep doing it. No, it's you do it, test it, survey it, and then adjust it.
Yeah.
As people tell you, and so they'll continue to evolve. Um, the technology that we got and fell into and learned as part of COVID has been really good to help us continue to get the information out.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's fascinating. Yeah. So one of the other areas that was kind of part of the, best places to work win, and that got mentioned, were some of the internal training programs. And so one of them I know that you I think mentioned maybe offhand earlier was Pasco U, and I think there's also a
Yep.
leadership
Mm-hmm.
development course. So
Yep.
can you talk a little bit about those and kind of maybe how they work, and then kind of how
Sure.
widespread they are and who gets to
So
participate?
so right. So Pasco use our what we call our umbrella training program, and under it
Mm-hmm.
has several different things from the standard annual training that you have to have, or biannual training like CPR or first aid. From that is captured in the group, but also we have what we call our degree alternative program. So if
Mm-hmm.
somebody doesn't have associate's or master's degree, they can actually work through courses to get what we will call an equivalent, so that they can qualify on something that requires an education level. Now it's county only, right? You can't take that next door or whatever. It's internally county, but it allows them to qualify for jobs that they wouldn't necessarily qualify due to the educational requirement. Now, obviously, there are some that are excluded from that, like engineering and that have specific degree issues. Then we have leadership development program. We actually have our own Toastmasters program that's county run. We have our own Toastmasters group. And our LDP, really, we're growing that into 3 levels. Right now we do LDP, which is geared to the upcoming leader, the growing leader, the new younger leader that we're trying to grow into the organization. And they run 2 cohorts a year now of about 25 each. And that's what it is, learning leadership, learning how to be a leader, right? We also run a certified public manager. We have our own cohort, a CPM cohort, certified public managers cohort with FSU, Florida State.
Cool. Mm-hmm.
We pay for it. They come down, they train our people. 25 over an 18-month period, I think is how long that goes. And we're going to actually start staggering them where we almost always have 2 cohorts running through that. And then working on building a 3rd level for, hey, you just got promoted, go take this leadership and development course. There's a 3rd level of leadership, because ultimately everything rises and falls on the quality of the leadership in the organization. And so those there, any county employee can sign up for those. Some of them are a little more competitive, like the leadership development program are competitive. CPM is competitive. And then we also participate in the community leadership Pasco and leadership Tampa Bay with employees every year. We sponsor employees into both of those programs. So it's a very, very robust training program. And for anybody in the organization, from the basics, from Excel to Lean Six Sigma, we have over 10% of the organization has had at least some level of Lean Six Sigma training.
Yeah. And what a great
right.
What like a great approach to like not only develop the skill set within the organization to just spread stuff like Lean Six Sigma, but also I would argue it's probably a great retention strategy too. Like, hey, I can see myself advancing up through this organization because of these programs.
Right. And I will say our leadership development LDP graduates promoted at a faster rate than non-LDP graduates.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a trend. They promoted a faster rate. The certified public managers course is geared more to the mid to senior level leaders already. Because frankly, we think it's important to start thinking systematically, start thinking in those terms and get outside of your little silo. And so, we are while we are county, we're also part of a group of local governments trying to provide services to their community, right? And so we're also very, from an org chart perspective, I can't just create another branch and promote somebody into it. Just like if I was a private business, hey, we got a new product line, we're going to create a VP of this, you go run it, right? We can't do that in local government. And so if I grow somebody great, but I don't have any place to promote them, part of my responsibility to the community and to the profession is to pick up the phone and try to find a place for them to continue to grow.
Yeah.
And we've done that too. So, when you only have 4 branches and 4 assistant county administrators, you can't necessarily promote everybody into one of them.
Yeah.
So, and we've done that, and we'll continue to do that. Ultimately, is you look out for what's best for the people, and it'll always pay dividends.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah. So the leadership development obviously plays a role in retention, and like you mentioned, like sometimes you develop leaders that need to go other places. But are there any other like strategies around retention? I know we were talking a little before we started recording around kind of
Right.
retention trends in Pasco County and
Right.
your guys' kind of approach to that. But what is kind of your, because it's obviously an issue in a lot of local governments right now that,
Right.
retention has become like more of an issue. And so like, obviously culture is part of this, obviously pay is part of
Right.
this, and development is part of this, but like, what's maybe your thoughts around that and kind of the approach in Pasco County?
Well, well, I think it, the biggest impact on that is the culture of the organization, right?
Yeah.
If people think they're valued as a member of the organization and are worth and bring worth to work and can bring their full self to work too, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
we are more than a 8 hour person, right? Um, they will stay through tough times, right? They will and maybe not take that job for the 10% more. Um, so we focus on that first, and that gets. I mean, we rewrote our HR manual a few years ago, and I told Barbara, my HR director, who is probably one of the best I've ever worked with. Um, I said, write it from the perspective of we hire adults that want to do a great job.
Yeah.
Don't write it as a compliance manual. I want the perspective to be you're an adult. We expect you to act like an adult, and we expect you to do a great job.
Yeah.
And that's the perspective of our HR manual, right? Our dress code is effectively dress work appropriate. Now, that means something different for me than it does for the parks maintenance tech
Yep.
or the firefighter. But I, I don't hire anybody that's not an adult outside of some summer help, temp summer help, right? And so why would I treat them like they're not an adult?
Yeah.
And so we've tried to revise and rewrite our policies under the mindset of not compliance based. We're not going to punish the 98% because of the 2% that can't follow the rules. We're gonna write off stuff for the 98%, and the 2% of you that can't follow the rules, you're either gonna have to learn how to follow the rules, or we'll help find you other places to work. And we got
Mm-hmm.
them right. I mean, we got them right, and 3,000 people. That's 50 people. So they're out
Yeah.
there, and so that's kind of the approach we take. We think the county went 8 years without a pay raise after the crash.
Wow.
And so when I got here, I told the board my number one priority, and we work additions to the budget through what we call business plan initiative process, where you have to justify and show how you're going to impact levels of service to the community with any increase to the budget, any increased level of service. And I told them my number one priority is take care of the employees. So before I fund anything else, we're going to fund pay raises.
Yeah.
So we did that 2017, we did it 2018, 2019, 2020. We're working on the 21 budget. COVID hits, right?
Mm-hmm.
March of 2020. And we sit in the budget meeting or in our internal small group, and we write on the board, how are we going to deal with the employees? All right, take care of our people through this, right? Because we had no clue. I don't think anybody in April and May or March and April, nobody had any idea what was going to happen with the
Yeah.
economy. Even in Florida, where, and so we wrote on the board basically a thermostat. At the bottom was, lay people off, cut people. And you go up from furloughs was the next worst one, right? Then you continue up to, no pay raise, but we managed to keep everybody, to, a small pay raise to what we were averaging.
Yeah.
We started with, man, if we can just keep everybody, no furloughs, no pay raise, that's where we thought we were going to be, right? And then things started opening up. Everybody realized they could work virtual. So why would I live some places where the climate's not as nice when I can live in Florida?
Yeah.
And, it exploded about the middle of May, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Literally exploded about the middle of May. And so we went to the board in June and July with we think we can give a 2% raise. And the board was so accustomed to what we were doing and so in tune to the culture, they turned around and said, no, Dan, you find money to make it 3. And so we ended up
That's great. Yeah.
the board ended up approving a 3% pay raise. We were one of the only ones in the region to do that. We've not touched the employee piece of health insurance since I've been here.
Hmm.
If anything, we've lowered it. We're out of balance. So our single rate is below what the market pays for single. So what you pay for a single, and that's just whether you're single or not. We're just covering you, right, in health
Yeah.
insurance, and your family's covered somewhere else. Our family is too expensive compared to the market. So we over the years we've been trying to rebalance those. We still have work to do, but um, so but we've not touched the employee piece of that in
Yeah.
6 years, and we're not going to this year. And so, there's I think it's interesting. The team almost now, when an issue comes up, almost the first reaction is almost, how's it impact our people?
Yeah.
Or what message is this sending to our people? What are they going to hear? So that's, which is a great place to be in, because they're the ones that take care of the job, right? I
Mm-hmm.
do. I have very little impact on the day-to-day customer service at Pasco County. I don't, right? But the counterattack and planning does.
Yep. Yep.
So let's make life easy for them, make it where
Mm-hmm.
they love to do their job, because then everybody will see it. So, um, so we do. So it's paid class study. We do a paid class study every 3 years. We do it internally. We're doing one now. We, for the 5 years I've been here, have tried to stay ahead of what the living wages for Pasco County.
Yeah.
And then when the state this year went to, in their budget, raised the floor for state employees at 15, I said, well, that's the minimum we can do this year, right? Because Pasco is still lower than that from a living wage perspective. So we're doing that this year in the budget. All the decompression that you have to do is part of that.
Mm-hmm.
Now it helps. We're growing like crazy, right?
Yeah.
Our ad valorem property values are skyrocketing. Our revenue is in a really strong position. But 5 years ago, Pasco was single A minus from a financial perspective, 9.6% fund balance in the general fund, and today we're a double A plus with 16 points. Actually, 20. We ended up the fiscal year through the audited number was about 22% fund balance.
Oh, wow.
And we had a pandemic in the middle of that.
Yeah.
So I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
so the board's done some really good stuff based on what we've tried to recommend to them, and so they've really, people ask how do the elected officials. One of the things we have tried to really focus them on is, and I had a conversation with one of them last week. Everything you say impacts the people.
Yeah.
You love the people. They do a great job for you. So be very mindful of what you say and how you talk about the team. And frankly, they use that term. They don't use the word staff. They use the word, it's my team, right? Our team, which is little semantics, but sometimes words are important.
Hmm.
But I had a conversation with one of them. I said, Commissioner, the words you say impact people. So what I'd ask is that if you want to correct policy at the board, those are the things we talk about. Don't talk about the way a department did or did not do a particular review in a negative light. We praise in public, we correct and criticize in private.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, thank you for that. I didn't think that's what I was doing, but and so they can be educated too, and most of them come from a small business, right? And so they understand a little bit of that. So yeah. So,
well, and that's fascinating. I wanted to ask about that because, like, I imagine coming into an organization that hasn't done pay raises in that long, and like probably a board that that wasn't used to approving that. Like, how do you shift that conversation? Is it just those one-on-one conversations where this is the value that we want to show, this is how we want to like get people bought in and make sure we're hiring good folks and providing great service? Is that kind of the argument, or like how do you make that case to get like that elected body kind of on board with maybe these more internal things that aren't, it's hard to like go and campaign on, hey, we raised
right.
staff wages.
And they still, they want the community to function well.
Yeah.
and they want the organization to function well because they get the complaints too, right? They're the first complaint department.
Mm-hmm.
And so I sat down with them early on, and even during the interview process, we talked about these places that are best places to work. At the Fortune 500 level, when you look at those lists and you look at, okay, of those who routinely wins best place to work, right? Google, Southwest Air, Virgin Air, USAA, just to name a few. Do you realize that they all average, on average, if you're on that list, that best place to work list, on average, return has a 10 to 15% higher return on investment annually to their shareholders than the companies not on the list.
Hmm.
So, from a business perspective, yes, we don't return profits to shareholders. But if it works on the private side, it will work on the public side. The results are different.
Yeah.
And why does it work like that? Why do people love Southwest even though you have to pick your own seat? Because of the way they're treated.
Yeah.
Because of the customer service. Well, the customer service is because of the way the leadership there treats their employees, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if we treat our employees right, again, I stole a quote from somebody else, the employees will treat your clients right. And if your clients are treated right, that will reward the shareholders. Well, our shareholders are the 600,000 people live here, right? That's who we're trying to reward, who are also customers. So it's just it's not, there's not a direct line from culture to performance. I can't go out and say be engaged, enjoy your work here, right? You can't go out and do that. You have to work the people piece and have them buy into it, and you do that by taking care of them and understand what their needs are and trying to meet them. So and that's sometimes that's counterintuitive.
Yeah.
You'll do things that don't necessarily seem like business sense, but make sense from a people perspective, which then ultimately makes a business sense.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that unspoken bottom of the pyramid. If you're not taking care of that, it doesn't matter the smart investments or whatever initiatives that you're doing. There's not that core bought in staff to do it well. Yeah.
Right.
Well, that was fascinating, and this has been a great conversation. I know we are a little over our time, so I've got one last question for you, and then we'll get to the a traditional last question on GovLove. So what's next for you? I know you've got a little news, and it's a time of transition, and which is I think we were saying before, it's like kind of funny. I think we captured you during your transition going to Pasco County about 5 years ago, and now you're here again. So what's next for you?
Yeah. So my wife and I started working on a transition about 3 years ago. And so in middle of May, I advised the board that I was going to be leaving. And by the end of my last day in the office into July, really county administrator at the end of September. And then we are transitioning out of the country to work and doing leadership development and leadership training in a country in Southern Europe, really working with church pastors and leaders in various churches to train and develop leaders in those scenarios. So resigning here, the board on Tuesday, the June 21st, knowing that you're on automatic. Actually, one of because of continuity and they love what's going on with the culture, appointed one of my assistant county administrators to replace me in a permanent on the 1st of October. He'll be interim on the 1st of August. And so they wanted to make sure they ensured the continued development of the culture through this and then build some stability into the organization. So that's what we're working on. Pasco's in a great place. It's structurally, we're financially and structurally sound, but Florida in general is in a good place from a structural perspective economically. Just the virtual economy has driven a lot of people to live someplace they're going to like, right? To live, it's I can play golf in January in Florida, right? Why do I need to live somewhere else where I can't do that if that's what I want to do, or fish, or you name it, right? And so that's even though I think we're seeing headwinds at the national level from a economy perspective, and that will domino into local government, I'm not sure how that, if that hits necessarily Florida very hard, just because
Mm-hmm.
we're actually a bunch of micro economies. We're not really one, you know, when the nation's going well, there are always areas of the country that aren't doing well, and vice
Yeah.
versa.
Yeah.
So so we'll see. But I think the county's in a great place. Mike's a great guy. We got a great team in place. And the board said that. In fact,
Yeah.
they said that all on Tuesday, at the board meeting. And so I'm really thrilled about that. That we've managed to make that transition, and now we're going to work on that over the next few months.
Yeah. Well, that's great. That's very exciting for you and your wife, and kind of the next opportunity. I have to ask, as the GovLove co-host, but do you think you'll be back in local government at some point, or is this kind of
So
where you see right now
I
your career?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I may not be in a role like this. There will be plenty of people that have. I will continue to mentor people and provide
Mm-hmm.
advice and some leadership counseling and coaching to those that I do today. So it will probably be more like that um, than direct in the role doing the work.
Yeah.
I spent 6.5, 7 years active duty military, 12 years doing engineering, and now this will end up being right about 12 years doing local government. So
Yeah.
we'll see. You never say never, and
Yeah.
you never say never. You don't ever tell people, I don't care how much you hate the job, don't burn a bridge. You never know when you're going to want that bridge. And I don't hate the job. I truly love the job and love the people. But you know, you never know. None of
Yeah.
us can predict the future. uh, you know, if you can, then you probably won't be in local government anyway.
Yeah.
You'll be working somewhere else. So,
Very true. Awesome.
but,
Well, so our traditional last question on GovLove is to say, if you could be the GovLove DJ and you got to pick the exit music for this episode, what song would you pick?
you know, um, it would be one I didn't really realize. I'm not a necessarily a big musical person, but when I
Mm-hmm.
talked to my chief of staff about this move 6 weeks ago, the text I got from her over the weekend included "One Last Time," the Hamilton,
Oh,
the song
nice.
when Washington tells Alexander Hamilton he's resigning.
Yeah.
Um, Now, obviously, the power transition was a little different, or not running again, not running again. Power transition was a little different. But it's interesting. We talk about power a lot at the county because one of the ways I think we've been successful is we continue to try to give power away. Right, when you give
Mm,
decisions away, you're giving power away, and that was actually a very critical time in our country's history. He could have kept doing that, and we would have ended up with a monarchy, not the
mm-hmm.
republic we have. Right,
Mm-hmm.
because of who he was. And so he walked away from that. And power is an interesting thing. We all deal with that in local government, whether it's proximity to power or actually the power. And we got to be very careful because that's a very dangerous thing.
Yeah.
Right. And so,
Yeah.
we continue to try to give it away to the lowest possible level, delegate decisions, give the power away. And it's amazing what that does. But it also helps protect you too,
Yeah.
because we've seen example after example of somebody that got sucked up into it, right, and
Mm-hmm.
decided to abuse it,
Mm-hmm.
and so. But anyway, yeah. One short question, uh, long answer. One last time, Hamilton. So.
Oh, that's great. That's a great pick, and very timely comments there.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
thank my chief of staff for that one.
Yeah.
She does a great job.
Well, awesome. Well, Dan, that ends our episode for today. Thank you so much for coming on and talk with me. I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing kind of what's going on in Pasco County. For our listeners, GovLove is brought to you by engaging local government leaders, and the best way to support GovLove is to become an ELGO member. You can reach us online at elgo.org/GovLove or on Twitter at the handle @GovLovePodcast. And ELGO's annual conference is coming up this fall, October 13th and 14th in Phoenix, Arizona. Learn more and register now by going to elgl.org/elgl22. You can subscribe to GovLove on your favorite podcast app, where you can also find the Pasco podcast. So go tell a friend or colleague about GovLove and help us spread the word that GovLove is the go-to place for local government stories. And with that, thank you for listening. This has been GovLove, a podcast about local government.
To talk about neutrality, sir. With Britain and France on the verge of war, is this the best time? I want the one against partisan fighting. But pick up a pen, start writing. I want to talk about what I have learned, the hard-won wisdom I have earned. As far as the people are concerned, you have to serve. You could continue to serve. One last time, the people will hear from me. One last time. And if we get this right, we're gonna teach them how to say goodbye.